Now I'm hoping that after my reading, we'll have some stories that you might want to share. You'll have some stories about your grandmother. My grandmother was Sarah Kastner Wilhelm. My maternal grandmother died in 1989 on Ash Wednesday, a week after my father passed away. I grew up in an idealized world, not experiencing death. Then in the space of a week, I lost a parent and a grandparent. Shock, grief, mourning. They were both great storytellers, charismatic, the focus of attention. I felt a void with their departure. My grandmother Sarah was a farmer's wife who outlived her husband by nearly 2 decades. He was so quiet and unassuming, I can't ever remember hearing him speak. But probably my father talked with him, engaged him in conversation, made him laugh. Sarah collected eggs in the early hours from the chicken coop. They were still warm when she brought them into the summer kitchen, opened her apron, and put one in my hand. Then she would tell me about wringing the chickens' necks, how they ran around the yard, headless, before they collapsed. I pictured those scrawny-legged creatures, all body and feathers, no sound, just a confusion of movement, churning up the dirt. Sarah was a baker. She made her own bread. I liked to watch the loaves rise under the white towels placed near the back of the wood stove before she put them in the oven. As they were baking, the smell of fresh bread filled the farmhouse. Never using a recipe, she also baked pies, mostly apple, picked from her own orchard. She said when they had hired help, she would bake a dozen in the morning after serving breakfast. Once, when I was a young mother, I spoke to her on the phone, proudly saying I had baked an apple pie that day. Then she listed the chores she had done. She wasn't bragging, just sharing. Still, I felt like a lazy city dweller. Sarah also grew vegetables. I have fond memories of pulling the long green pods off the tall, spindly stalks to pick out the round peas, then popping them in my mouth. The new potatoes that came out of the earth peeled themselves when boiled. I remember the explosion in my mouth of freshness when eaten hot. They did not require added flavors like salt or butter. The flesh of those potatoes was like melted butter. My grandmother also grew cabbages she grew to make sauerkraut. She shredded them by hand, tossed them in a bowl with salt, then packed them into blue earthenware pots. I tried to replicate this hapdash method at home. The limp vegetable simply grew moldy, never reaching the stage of fermentation. Sarah was a strong woman, but in death she looked frail inside the satin-lined coffin. It was open for viewing at the funeral parlor, but closed the next day at church. The priest wore white satin for the funeral service, a ritualistic event. He sprinkled holy water and incense over the coffin while chanting incantations. The ground was frozen, so Sarah had to rest in the mausoleum over the winter. I returned to the farmhouse after the service with relatives, friends, and neighbors.